Hey, welcome to our channel, Defense of Earth. Today's video top 5 most game-changing military innovations in history. Number 1 is gunpowder, the explosive invention that changed the world. It begins in the heart of ancient China more than 1,000 years ago. Alchemists, in their ceaseless quest for the elixir of immortality, stumbled upon something quite the opposite, an agent of destruction, power, and transformation. This accidental discovery, a blend of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, would come to be known as gunpowder, and its impact on human history would be nothing short of explosive. At first, the Chinese harnessed its power for firecrackers, using bright bursts of light and sound to ward off evil spirits. But soon they realized that this black powder held far greater potential. By the 9th century, they had developed crude flamethrowers and fire lances, primitive ancestors of the firearms that would one day dominate battlefields. The secrets of gunpowder, however, would not remain in China for long. Through trade and conquest, the knowledge of this volatile mixture spread westward along the Silk Road. By the 13th century, the Mongols, masterful warriors and relentless conquerors, carried the formula into the Islamic world and Europe. Here, the implications of gunpowder were immediately understood, and its refinement began in earnest. European gunsmiths and engineers worked tirelessly to perfect its use in warfare. The 14th and 15th centuries saw the rise of cannons, powerful siege weapons that shattered the once impregnable walls of castles and cities. The days of chivalry and armored knights, who had long ruled medieval battlefields, were numbered. With the advent of handheld firearms, matchlocks, flintlocks, and eventually rifles, warfare itself was forever altered. Empires rose and fell under the roar of gunpowder. The Ottomans breached Constantinople's walls in 1453, with their massive bombard cannons, signaling the end of the Byzantine Empire. In Europe, conflicts like the 30 Years' War and Napoleonic Wars showcased the deadly efficiency of gunpowder weapons, while across the Atlantic, the colonial conquests of the Americas were largely decided by musket and cannon fire. But gunpowder was not merely a tool of war, it was also a catalyst for scientific progress. The pursuit of more powerful and stable explosives led to advancements in chemistry, metallurgy, and engineering. By the 19th century, new formulations like smokeless powder replaced traditional black powder, making firearms more efficient and deadly than ever before. And so, from the hands of Chinese alchemists to the battlefields of the modern world, gunpowder shaped the course of history in ways its discoverers could never have imagined. It turned the tides of war, shattered empires, and built new ones in their place. Even today, in an age of advanced explosives and high-tech weaponry, the echoes of its invention still thunder across the world. For better or worse, gunpowder was the spark that set history ablaze. Number 2 is tank, the iron beast of the battlefield. In the chaos of war, where men once fought in trenches and cavalry once thundered across open fields, a new beast was born, one made not of flesh and bone, but of iron and fire. It was a weapon unlike any seen before, a rolling fortress that could cross craters, crush barbed wire, and withstand a hailstorm of bullets. It was called the tank, and its arrival would change the battlefield forever. The birth of an iron monster. The story of the tank begins in the muddy trenches of World War I. By 1914, warfare had reached a brutal stalemate. Machine guns, artillery, and barbed wire had turned the battlefields of Europe into death traps. Soldiers, dug deep in their trenches, could do little but charge into a hail of bullets, often to their doom. The solution, it seemed, was simple: create an armored vehicle that could withstand gunfire, roll over obstacles, and break through enemy lines. The idea had been suggested before. Engineers had experimented with armored cars and even steam-powered land ships in the past. But now, under the desperate conditions of war, the time had finally come to bring the concept to life. In 1915, British engineers, led by Ernest Swinton and backed by Winston Churchill, developed a new machine, a fully tracked armored vehicle armed with machine guns and cannons. To keep it a secret, they called it a water tank, a code name that stuck. On September 15, 1916, at the Battle of the Somme, the world saw tanks in combat for the first time. As British Mark I tanks rumbled across the battlefield, enemy soldiers watched in horror. Though slow and unreliable, these armored giants were a glimpse of the future. The age of trench warfare was coming to an end. World War II. The tank comes of age. Between the wars, tank technology advanced rapidly. By the time World War II erupted in 1939, tanks had become faster, deadlier, and more sophisticated. They were no longer just support weapons. They were now the backbone of modern armies. The Germans were the first to truly master armored warfare. Under the command of Heinz Guderian, the German military developed Blitzkrieg, lightning war, Abwehrkrieg, strategy that used fast-moving tanks to smash through enemy lines. In 1939 and 1940, German panzer divisions swept across Poland and France, proving that tanks would dominate the new era of warfare. The Allies, too, fielded powerful tanks. The British developed the Matilda II and the Churchill, while the Americans introduced the M4 Sherman, a versatile and reliable tank that became the backbone of their forces. Meanwhile, in the vast battlefields of the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union unleashed the legendary T-34, a tank that combined speed, armor, and firepower in a way that shocked German forces. As the war raged on, tanks grew bigger and more powerful. The German Tiger I and Tiger II, with their thick armor and devastating guns, became symbols of battlefield supremacy. But in the end, mass production and strategy proved decisive. The Allies, producing thousands of tanks, overwhelmed the Axis powers, rolling through Europe and ending the war in 1945. The Cold War and the age of the modern tank. As the world split into East and West, tanks continued to evolve. The Cold War saw the birth of the main battle tank, MBT, a tank that could do it all: fast, well-armored, and heavily armed. The American M48 Patton, the Soviet T-55, and later the M1 Abrams and T-72 became symbols of the superpower rivalry. Tanks fought in wars across the globe, from the Korean War and Vietnam to the Middle East and beyond. They clashed in the Arab-Israeli wars, where Israeli Merkavas faced off against Soviet-built tanks. They rolled across the deserts of Iraq in the Gulf War, where U.S. Abrams tanks destroyed Iraqi forces in a stunning display of modern armored warfare. The tank in the 21st century. Today, despite drones, missiles, and cyber warfare, the tank remains a king of the battlefield. Modern tanks like the Russian T-14 Armata, the American M1A2 Abrams, and the German Leopard 2 feature advanced armor, computerized targeting systems, and even active protection that shoots down incoming missiles. But the question remains, will the tank continue to dominate future wars, or will new technology make it obsolete? Some argue that precision airstrikes and drones have reduced the need for armored behemoths, while others believe that tanks will evolve, becoming faster, smarter, and more adaptable to modern warfare. The legacy of the tank. From the muddy trenches of World War I to the high-tech battlefields of today, the tank has remained a symbol of power, resilience, and destruction. It has broken enemy lines, turned the tide of wars, and shaped the course of history. As long as war exists, the Iron Beast will continue to evolve, rolling forward, unstoppable, into the battles of the future. Number 3 is the aircraft carriers, the floating fortress that rules the seas. The birth of a revolution at sea. Before the rise of aircraft carriers, battleships ruled the waves. The might of a navy was measured in big guns and thick armor, but at the dawn of the 20th century, a new technology emerged that would change warfare forever: the airplane. Naval strategists soon realized that aircraft could spot enemy ships, drop bombs, and even sink vessels from above. The challenge was finding a way to launch planes from the sea. The first attempts were crude but promising. In 1910, an American pilot, Eugene Ely, made history by taking off from a wooden platform on the USS Birmingham. 2 months later, he performed an even greater feat, landing on a ship for the first time. The era of carrier aviation had begun. During World War I, both Britain and Japan experimented with aircraft launching from modified ships. The British converted a battlecruiser into HMS Furious, the world's first aircraft carrier, launching biplanes to attack German air bases. But these early carriers lacked the ability to recover aircraft, limiting their effectiveness. The carrier comes of age, World War II. It was in World War II that the aircraft carrier proved its worth forever, changing the nature of naval warfare. The great battleships of the past, once seen as invincible, were now vulnerable to squadrons of carrier-launched aircraft. The first major sign of this shift came in 1941, when the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor demonstrated the deadly reach of carrier-based planes. From a fleet of 6 aircraft carriers, Japan launched over 350 bombers and fighters, devastating the U.S. Pacific Fleet in a matter of hours. The era of battleships was over. The aircraft carrier had become the most powerful weapon at sea. From the Battle of Midway to the island-hopping campaigns of the Pacific, carriers played a decisive role. At Midway in June 1942, American Dauntless dive bombers, launched from the carriers USS Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, sank 4 Japanese carriers in a single day, turning the tide of the war in the Pacific. By the war's end, massive fleet, carriers such as the USS Essex and the Japanese Shinano, dominated naval combat. Carrier aviation had changed the world forever. The Cold War, the rise of the supercarrier. After World War II, the aircraft carrier did not fade into history. It became even larger, deadlier, and more advanced. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union built powerful navies, but it was the U.S. that mastered carrier strike groups, powerful fleets centered around massive supercarriers capable of launching nuclear bombers, reconnaissance aircraft, and fighters anywhere in the world. The defining moment of this era came in 1955 when the U.S. commissioned the USS Forrestal, the world's first supercarrier designed for jet aircraft. These ships dwarfed their World War II predecessors with angled flight decks, steam catapults, and massive air wings. In 1961, the USS Enterprise, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, took to the seas, capable of sailing for years without refueling. Nuclear power meant these ships could travel anywhere without stopping, giving the U.S. unmatched global reach. During conflicts like the Vietnam War, Gulf War, and the War on Terror, carriers proved their value again and again. Their ability to project power meant that the U.S. could launch airstrikes from the middle of the ocean, striking deep into enemy territory without needing land bases. The aircraft carrier today, kings of the ocean. Today, the aircraft carrier remains the ultimate symbol of naval dominance. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers, each capable of carrying over 75 aircraft. The modern Gerald R. Ford-class carriers, the most advanced warships ever built, feature electromagnetic catapults, advanced radar, and even drone integration. Other nations have followed suit. China has built multiple carriers, including the Shandong, to challenge U.S. dominance in the Pacific. Russia, India, France, and the U.K. also operate carriers, each seeking to project power across the seas. The U.K.'s new HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales represent a resurgence in British naval power. Meanwhile, technology is changing carrier warfare. Stealth fighters like the F-35B, unmanned drones, and hypersonic missiles are shaping the future of naval aviation. Some question whether carriers will survive in an age of anti-ship ballistic missiles and satellite-guided weapons, but for now, they remain the heart of any modern navy. Number 2 is nuclear weapon, the force that changed the world. The birth of a terrible idea. At the dawn of the 20th century, few could have imagined that the tiniest components of matter, atoms, held the key to the most destructive force in history. Yet, as the field of nuclear physics advanced, so too did the realization that energy beyond comprehension lay trapped within the atomic nucleus. The breakthrough came in 1938, when German scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann discovered nuclear fission, the process of splitting atoms to release energy. Soon, Physicists across the world grasped the terrifying implications. If a chain reaction could be harnessed, it could create a bomb of unimaginable power. In 1939, as the specter of World War II loomed over Europe, scientists Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard penned a letter to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany might develop an atomic bomb. The race was on. The Manhattan Project, Science Goes to War. Thus began the Manhattan Project, the most secret and ambitious scientific undertaking in history. Under the leadership of General Leslie Groves and the brilliant physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project brought together the greatest minds of the time. Across the United States, in secret laboratories from Los Alamos to Oak Ridge, scientists worked day and night to unlock the destructive power of the atom. The result was two bombs, each more powerful than anything the world had ever seen. One, fueled by uranium, was codenamed Little Boy. The other, powered by plutonium, was called Fat Man. On July 16, 1945, in the deserts of New Mexico, the first nuclear explosion, codenamed Trinity, lit up the sky. A blinding fireball, a shockwave that shattered windows for miles, and a towering mushroom cloud heralded the dawn of the atomic age. Watching the explosion, Oppenheimer whispered words from Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a new kind of warfare. With the war still raging in the Pacific, the United States made the fateful decision to use the bomb. On August 6, 1945, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay soared above the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At 8:15 a.m., it released Little Boy. The bomb fell for 44 seconds before detonating. In an instant, 80,000 people were killed, their bodies incinerated by the fireball or crushed by the shockwave. A city was turned to ashes. Thousands more would perish in the days and weeks that followed from radiation poisoning. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing 40,000 instantly. The Cold War and the arms race. With the war ended, a new conflict began, the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, once allies, became bitter rivals. Both nations understood that nuclear weapons were now the ultimate tool of power. In 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb, breaking America's monopoly on nuclear power. The arms race escalated. In 1952, the U.S. tested the first hydrogen bomb, a weapon hundreds of times more powerful than those dropped on Japan. The Soviets followed with their own in 1953. For decades, the world lived in fear of mutually assured destruction, the idea that if one superpower launched a nuclear attack, the other would respond, ensuring the annihilation of both. Crises like the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 brought the world to the very brink of nuclear war. By the 1980s, there were tens of thousands of nuclear warheads across the globe, enough to destroy the world many times over. The struggle for peace and the nuclear legacy. Recognizing the existential threat, world leaders began efforts to curb nuclear proliferation. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, was signed in 1968, followed by arms control agreements like SALT, START, and New START, which aimed to reduce nuclear stockpiles, yet nuclear weapons never truly disappeared. Today, 9 nations possess them: the United States, Russia, China, France, United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, North Korea. Israel, unconfirmed. Despite reductions, thousands of nuclear warheads remain, each one capable of devastating entire cities. New threats have emerged, from rogue states seeking nuclear power to fears of nuclear terrorism. Number 5 is drones and AI warfare, the rise of the machines, the origins from reconnaissance to warfare. The idea of unmanned warfare is not new. In the past, armies experimented with remote-controlled weapons, early guided torpedoes, radio-controlled planes, and even unmanned bombs. The first major step toward modern drones came in 1917, when inventors in the United States developed the Kettering bug, an early attempt at an unmanned flying bomb during World War I. Though it never saw combat, it paved the way for future developments. By World War II, both the Allies and Axis powers experimented with radio-controlled aircraft, but it was during the Cold War that drones began to take on a larger role. The United States and the Soviet Union used drones for reconnaissance, spying deep into enemy territory without risking human pilots. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. deployed early reconnaissance drones like the Ryan Model 147, taking photographs over enemy positions. But these early drones were still limited. They could not carry out attacks, nor could they make decisions on their own. The rise of armed drones, the age of remote warfare. The true revolution came in the 21st century with the rise of GPS, advanced sensors and satellite communications. Drones evolved from simple reconnaissance tools to fully weaponized machines. In the early 2000s, the U.S. military introduced the MQ-1 Predator, a drone that could not only spy on enemies, but also strike with deadly precision. Armed with Hellfire missiles, the Predator became a symbol of modern counterterrorism. For the first time, war could be waged from thousands of miles away. Operators sitting in control rooms in Nevada could launch strikes in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria with the push of a button. Then came the MQ-9 Reaper, a faster, deadlier version of the Predator, capable of carrying multiple missiles and loitering over battlefields for hours. The Reaper became the primary weapon in the War on Terror, targeting insurgents and high-profile terrorists with unmatched precision. By the 2010s, China, Russia, Israel, and Turkey all developed their own combat drones, the Turkish Bayraktars. TB2 proved devastating in conflicts in Libya, Syria, and the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh War, where drones wiped out tanks, artillery, and even entire air defense systems. Drones were no longer just support weapons. They had become decisive forces on the battlefield. The rise of AI warfare, when machines think for themselves. If drones changed warfare, then artificial intelligence, AI, is pushing it even further. The future is no longer just about remote-controlled machines. It is about autonomous systems that can think, react, and even fight without human intervention. In 2020, the world saw a glimpse of this future.